It was a calm, quiet evening on Loch Morar. The water lay still, as if waiting for something, anything, to disturb its glassy surface. Connor sat in a small fishing boat watching the last streaks of twilight fade into night. The loch was peaceful, so quiet he could hear every ripple, every soft whisper of the wind through the trees. He was used to these moments of solitude, where the world seemed to hold on to its breath, but this night it was different. Just as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a deep purple shadow across the water, something broke the surface. At first, it was just a gentle swell, as though the loch had sighed in its sleep. But then he saw it, a shape. No, more like a shadow, emerging from the depths, slow and deliberate. Connor froze. His breath caught in his throat, his heart pounding in his chest. He couldn't tear his eyes away. It rose higher, dark and sinuous, the water streaming off of what looked like a series of massive, rolling humps. The air around him seemed to grow colder, and an overwhelming sense of dread washed over him, and then he saw it. The head. A grotesque, serpentine figure, like something torn from the pages of a nightmare. Its skin, slick with water, shimmered in the dying light, and its eyes, black, hollow and depthless, stared directly at him. He could see its mouth, filled with rows of sharp, jagged teeth, opening and closing, as though it was tasting the air. Connor couldn't move. He couldn't breathe. The creature lingered for what felt like an eternity, silently watching him, before it slowly slid back beneath the surface, leaving nothing but ripples in its wake. He didn't dare move, even as the waters calmed once more. He knew, deep down, that whatever he had seen wasn't meant for human eyes. The topic of tonight's episode is the Morag. The Morag, a creature that stirs the murky waters of Loch Morar, is one of Scotland's lesser-known, yet equally terrifying lake monsters. Descriptions of the beasts vary from encounter to encounter, but common threads suggest a creature that defies natural explanation. It is often depicted as a serpent-like figure between 20 and 30 feet in length, with a series of humps that rise and fall as it moves through the water. Its skin is said to be dark, almost black, and slick like that of an eel or a water snake, glistening eerily in the moonlight. The head of the Morag is what haunts the dreams of those unlucky enough to witness it. Some describe it as having a horse-like shape, with a long neck and large soulless eyes, but others claim it more closely resembles that of a massive eel, with jaws filled with sharp, predatory teeth. Whatever form it takes, all who have seen the Morag agree on one thing. Its presence brings with it an overwhelming sense of dread, a palpable terror that grips you and refuses to let go. Loch Morar, deeper than even the infamous Loch Ness, is the creature's domain. The loch's remote location and its staggering depths, which plunge to over 1,000 feet, make it perfect for hiding place for something that should not exist in the natural world. Legends of the Morag date back centuries, with whispers of its existence passed down through generations of Highland families. Some believe the creature to be a guardian of the loch, while others claim it is a harbinger of doom, appearing only when death or disaster is imminent. In Highland folklore, water spirits are not uncommon. Some say the Morag is a remnant of an ancient god or fae that once roamed the land before the coming of man. Others suggest it may be an elemental force, tied to the dark waters and the secrets hidden in the depths of Loch Morar. Still, the most unsettling theory is that the Morag is not a natural creature at all, but something from another realm, a shadow of something much older and much darker than we can comprehend. Connor's chilling experience is far from the only encounter with the Morag. Over the years there have been numerous sightings, each one more unsettling than the last. They paint a vivid and terrifying picture of the creature that inhabits the murky depths of Loch Morar. In 1969, two men, Duncan and Andrew, were out on Loch Morar one quiet evening, casting their nets for fish in the twilight. The loch was eerily calm, with only the soft lapping of water against the side of their boats to break the silence. Suddenly, with no warning, their boat jolted violently, as if struck by something solid beneath the surface. The men exchanged nervous glances, assuming they'd hit a submerged rock, but what surfaced in front of them was no rock. The water churned, and from the depths a large dark shape emerged. It was long, serpent-like, with thick, muscular humps rising from the loch, slick with water. The head, however, was what truly terrified them, grotesquely horse-like, but distorted, with features that seemed wrong, as if something had molded it out of nightmares. Its eyes were deep, hollow voids fixed directly on the two men. Andrew later described the feeling of being watched by it as staring into the abyss and having it stare right back at you. Duncan, gripped by a surge of primal fear, grabbed an oar from the boat and swung with all of his might at the creature's head. The oar struck with a resounding crack, but the impact barely seemed to faze the monster. The creature let out a sound, something that neither man could never forget. It was a low, guttural moan, almost like the groaning of the earth itself, mixed with a hissing that reverberated through the air. As quickly as it had surfaced, the creature then sank back into the loch, leaving behind only a whirlpool of dark, swirling water. The men didn't waste a second. They rowed back to shore with trembling hands, not daring to speak a word until they were safe on dry land once more. Even then, they struggled to find words for what they'd seen, but the terror in their eyes spoke volumes. They would never fish on Loch Morar again. Then there was Fiona. In the early 1980s, she and her family had been camping along the shores of the loch, a peaceful retreat from the hustle of city life. On the second night of their trip, Fiona, always adventurous, decided to go for an evening swim. It'd be something she wouldn't forget. The air was cool, and the water felt refreshing as she waded deeper into the loch, and ripples from her movements, the only disturbance in the others, was still water. The moonlight glinted off the surface, casting silvery streaks across the loch, giving it an almost otherworldly glow. For a while, everything seemed calmed. But then, out of nowhere, she felt it. Something brushed against her leg. At first, she thought it might be seaweed or even a large fish, but the sensation was somehow different. It was solid, powerful, and it moved with purpose. Panic began to set in, her breath coming in short gasps as she tried to swim back to shore. That's when she saw it, a massive, dark hump rising from the water not far from where she floated, glistening wet and silent. And it was moving towards her. The creature was closer than she realized as it neared. Fiona swore she could see more of it beneath the water, a shadowy, coiling form much larger than that was visible above the surface. The air seemed to thicken with dread, as though the creature were a mere presence had sucked all the warmth and life from its surroundings. She let out a scream, her voice echoing across the still loch, and thrashed desperately toward the shore. She could feel it behind her, moving steadily, the water rolling in its wake. Her feet finally touched the rocky bottom, and she stumbled onto the beach, collapsing in exhaustion. When she dared look back, the creature had vanished, the loch as calm and peaceful as it was before, as if nothing had ever happened. But she knew what she had seen, and the cold, unblinking eyes of the Morag would haunt her in her dreams for years to come. Another harrowing account came from Hamish, a local fisherman who had lived by the loch his whole life. Hamish was no stranger to the strange and eerie stories surrounding the loch, but like many, he dismissed them as mere folklore. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of beautiful red and gold, he sat by the shore, smoking his pipe and watching the water ripple gently in the fading light. He was alone, or so he thought. But as the light began to fade, he noticed something, a disturbance in the water far out in the loch. At first, he thought it was just a school of fish breaking the surface. But then he saw it, a large, dark mass slowly rising from the depths. His heart raced as he squinted through the growing darkness. The thing was huge, its massive, undulating form gliding effortlessly through the water, and what appeared to be large, coiled humps breaking the surface at regular intervals. Hamish froze, his pipe falling from his lips as he watched in stunned silence. He could feel its presence, a crushing weight of terror pressing down on him. And then the creature turned, its head slowly rising above the water, revealing a long, serpentine neck and a face that defied reason. It was as though something ancient and unknowable was staring at him, through him, with eyes that gleamed with cold, malevolent intelligence. For what felt like an eternity, the creature simply floated there watching him. Hamish later swore that the thing was assessing him, deciding whether or not he was a worthy prey. But then, just as quickly as it appeared, the creature sank back in the loch, disappearing without a trace, leaving only ripples in the water. Hamish sat there for hours, unable to move. The image of the creature burned into his mind. He packed up his fishing gear that night and never returned to the loch again, swearing to anyone who would listen that the Morag was real and it was watching. These stories are just a few of the many chilling encounters with the Morag, each one unsettling, a little bit more unsettling than the last. From fishermen to campers, the creature has shown itself to those who dare venture too close to the mysterious waters of Loch Morar. Some have escaped with only their wits and their lives, while others, well, we may never know. The Morag remains one of Scotland's most enigmatic and chilling cryptids, lurking in the dark waters of Loch Morar, seen only by those unfortunate enough to cross its path. It is an ancient guardian, or maybe a creature of myth, or something far more sinister. An echo of a time when gods and monsters walked among us. Perhaps, but we may never know. But if you ever find yourself by the shores of Loch Morar as the sun sets and the loch seems shrouded in darkness. Listen carefully. You may hear the faint whisper of something moving beneath the water's surface. And if you're lucky, or unlucky, you may catch a glimpse of the Morag itself. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey into the unknown. If you did enjoy tonight's episode, be sure to follow us for more tales of the strange and terrifying. And also, if you did like the show, give it a like, a thumbs up, share it with someone else that might want it. And because remember, sometimes the legends are more than just stories. They're warnings. Until next time, stay safe, stay curious, and beware what lurks below the surface.